Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. We've been talking about combat. I'm going to continue that discussion in this video, and I'm going to talk about two different things which I've added to the code, and they are initiative and running away. Initiative is simply who gets to go first, who gets the first blow. What we've been doing before this is just that the player character gets to go first. That's usually not how it works. Usually there's some sort of random process which might end with the player characters getting to go first or the enemy getting to go first. I've coded a very, very simple system where it's just a random roll. There aren't any abilities that contribute to gaining initiative. It's purely a toss of the coin. The other element is running away. Last video we introduced the possibility that the enemy might fail their morale check and therefore flee. And this video we're giving the player character the same option. Whenever it's your turn to attack, instead of choosing to attack, you can choose to run away. In a lot of systems, when you run away, there's a sort of penalty for that, and specifically, it's often the case that the enemy gets a free hit at you. And that's what I've done in this system. And in fact, I've set it up so that if you run away, the enemy gets a free attack at you, and they have an advantage. They add 4 to their roll to hit, as we'll see later when we look at the code. Now, I'm told that that's not very realistic, at least based on a video that I saw on YouTube by the YouTuber Lindy Beige, who some of you might know. He's done a lot of LARPing or live action role playing, and he says that you can usually, if you're in a fight which involves sort of ancient or medieval technology, i.e. shields and helmets and armor and swords and spears, you could probably manage to turn and run away without exposing yourself to the possibility of a parting blow. But even if it isn't realistic, it's interesting from a gaming point of view because it creates the choice of, well, do I want to run and therefore give them the advantage to hit me, or do I want to make a blow and hope that the sort of final strike is enough to kill them? So hopefully creating sort of fairly interesting decisions. So I've included it, even though I'm told it's not very realistic. So all right, let's look at what all that looks like in play, and then we'll spend the rest of the video going through the code. So first of all, the initiative. This time we have lost. As you can see, it says your enemy has the initiative. So when we press continue, and they actually hit us for 2 damage. And now we see that it's our turn next, and instead of it just saying continue, we have the option to attack or to flee. This time I'm going to choose to attack, so we hit for 1 damage. And now it's continue because it's the enemy's turn. We don't get the option to do anything before they have a go at trying to hit us, but luckily they miss. Exchange of blows there. We're not doing terribly well, are we? There we go. We finally hit for 1 damage. Okay, your enemy hits for 6 damage. Well, let's choose to flee. And as I said, the enemy gets a final blow. They miss, and we successfully flee the battle, and we have survived. You could, of course, add the possibility that the enemy comes after you or doesn't come after you, and perhaps then there's sort of stats to do with speed to see whether you get away, or hiding to see whether you're able to sort of escape them. It might depend on the terrain that you're in. It's probably easier to get away in a forest than in an empty flat plain, for example. But those are things we can add things we can add later. That right now, if you survive that parting blow, you manage to flee the battle and you are said to have survived. So let's spend the rest of the video looking at the code that allowed that to happen. Now, as you can see, I have split the code up. I had initialize and then the page strike, but I split the code that was on strike into display, click, and strike, just to make it a bit easier to look at, and also it was necessary because of the way that you enter the game, and we'll see. Well, no, I think I could have rearranged it and still had it on one page, but I decided to. It was a lot easier to split it up. It's a lot easier to see what's going on. So, first of all, initiative. Well, that's fairly simple. Instead of setting $AT, which is the variable that indicates who's attacking, 0 being the player character and 1 being the enemy, I've just set it to be random bracket 0, 1 unbracket. In other words, it's 0 or 1 with an equal chance. So we set $AT to that, and then we set $DE, which indicates the defender, to 1 minus $AT. So if AT is 0, then DE will be 1 minus 0, which is 1. If AT is 1, DE will be 1 minus 1, which is 0. In other words, if AT is 0, DE is 1, and if AT is 1, DE is 0, which is as it should be. Of course, we want the attacker and the defender to be different people, or it wouldn't sort of make sense. Then we change the variable, or set the variable M, which is the message that we're going to print once we display all of the stats. To be now, if AT equals 1, which is the enemy, we set M to be you have the initiative, which seems like a mistake. And otherwise, if AT is 0, then we set M to be your enemy has the initiative. But if 0 is the player character and 1 is the enemy, shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't it be if AT is 1, shouldn't we have the message your enemy has the initiative? Well, no, because, and I've put a little note here as well, because of where I've set up the code that switches the attacker and defender. You'll see how that works in a second. And then that having set that up, we then go to display. I won't, as usual, I'm going to skip the code that I've already dealt with. So display displays the stats and then moves on to the page click. And click will usually, and certainly at the beginning, end up here. There are various special conditions to do with if the player has run away or the player has died or the enemy has died. But at the start, of course, none of those things will be true, so we'll end up here. And there we set the attacker to be 1 minus AT. In other words, switch it from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0, and we do the same thing with DE. And then we give the player the thing that they need to click, and that sends you to strike, which is the equivalent of rolling the dice to see whether the attack hits. So that's why that's the correct message. If AT is 1, then it'll print the message, you have the initiative. Down here, it'll change AT to 0, and then we get to strike. So that's why it works out that way. So we have a slight difference here. If AT is not 0, we just have a link to click, which takes us to strike. If AT is equal to 0, we have two possibilities. We have a link to take us to strike, and then we have a couple of line breaks, and then we have the option that says flee instead of attack. And that will also take us to strike, but it will it'll change it'll change 3 variables before we do that. And the 3 variables that are change are $AT, which it will set to 1, $DE, which it will set to 0. In other words, it will set it up so that if we hadn't changed it, because we're in the bit where AT is equal 0, if we choose to just attack and go to strike, well then that's us attacking them. Whereas if we choose to flee, it'll change AT and DE so that it's them attacking us, because when we choose to run away, they get a free strike against us. And it also sets F to 1. Oops, I've accidentally moved it. It also sets F to 1. F is a new variable. It is F for flee, and it's set to 1 if you choose to flee. And it's set up that way so that it knows to end the combat after the enemy gets its final chance to wound you. So either way, we'll end up at strike. There's not a lot of difference in this code. This is just the code that rolls to see if whoever has hit, and if so, it rolls to see how much damage there is. It also contains the code for a morale check, if that's necessary, if the enemy is wounded but still alive, and hasn't yet made the morale check. The only change on this page is this bit here, where if F is equal to 1, and that will only be the case if you chose to flee on the previous page there. If F is equal to 1 and $H square bracket 0 and square bracket is greater than 0. H is the hit points array. In fact, it's the current hit points array, as opposed to S, which is the starting hit points array. And 0, as usual, refers to the player character. So if F is equal to 1 and the the player character's current hit points are over 0, in other words, they're still alive, so either the enemy's final blow missed, or it hit but didn't do enough damage to kill you, then add this to M, which is the variable that is the message that's going to be printed when we print all the stats. And that is just line break, you flee the battle. So therefore M will be in some sort of, will be something like your enemy misses, you flee the battle, or your enemy hits for 3 damage, you flee the battle. And the only other change on this page is that if F is equal to 1, in other words, if you're fleeing, we start by setting Z equal to a random number from 1 to 20 plus $B square bracket $AT and square bracket. $B is the attack bonus. And then the new code is that if F equals 1, we set Z, excuse me, we set Z equal to Z plus 4. In other words, add 4 to Z. So as the comment says, this is the bonus against you if you are fleeing. If you're running away, presumably you're not sort of parrying, you're not, using a shield or whatever, and so therefore they find it easier to hit you. Now, there isn't any final blow if the enemy runs away. They just sort of automatically get away. Perhaps you're too chivalrous to stab someone in the back or something like that, but I haven't coded for a similar final blow if the enemy runs away. But so those are the differences those are the changes to the code to deal with the possibility of fleeing. And then we go to display, and there's no change in code here. The only thing different is because all of the stuff manipulating M is done in the other pages, and then all the stuff to do with the link that you click is on the next page, which is click. So that is a way of adding a very simple initiative to your combat system, and also adding the opportunity for you to get away and for there being a sort of penalty for running away, which is that your enemy gets a final attempt to wound you and finds it easier to hit you in that situation than normal. Obviously, there are, complexities and more options that we could add to the system, but I'm trying to sort of do, add one thing at a time so it's easy to follow. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.